He gave his last $8 to a stranger, but he never expected 7 Navy SEALs to show up and change his life forever. Darren Cole hadn't eaten since morning. He stood outside the corner store, counting the wrinkled bills inside his pocket. $8. That was all he had left until payday, which was still 9 days away. As he turned to leave, he noticed an elderly man in a wheelchair struggling with his groceries. His hands shook, one bag slipped and fell. People passed by without helping. Darren didn't think twice. He walked over, picked up the groceries and said, "Sir, let me help you." The man looked up, embarrassed. I can't pay you, son." Darren smiled. "Didn't ask you to." He used his last $8 to buy the man food and pushed his wheelchair all the way to his small apartment 3 blocks away. The veteran whispered, "You're a good man, the world will remember you." Darren didn't know how true those words were. Inside the veteran's cramped apartment, Darren instantly sensed a lifetime of battles preserved in silence. The small living room smelled faintly of old books, gun oil, and worn leather, like time itself had refused to move on. As he stepped deeper inside, his eyes landed on a wall covered in medals framed behind dusty glass. Silver Star, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. A small faded photo of a young soldier standing beside his unit, all smiling despite the darkness of war behind their eyes. Darren paused. This wasn't just some man who needed groceries. This was someone who had seen hell and come back breathing. Those are real," Darren murmured. The old man nodded slowly, lowering himself into his creaking chair. "Every one of them cost a life," he said softly. "Mine or someone else." Darren didn't know what to say, so he quietly walked to the kitchen and started putting away groceries. The fridge rattled like it hadn't been closed properly in years. He rearranged the shelves, threw away a bag of spoiled lettuce, wiped the spill of orange juice that had dried into sticky crust. Walter watched him from the doorway, leaning on his worn cane. "You don't have to do all that," he said. "It's fine." "Yeah," Darren replied. "So is breathing, but we still do it." Walter chuckled, a quiet, broken sound, as if laughter was something he hadn't used in a long time. When the flickering kitchen light buzzed again, Darren pulled a chair beneath it, climbed up, twisted the bulb out, cleaned the socket a little, tightened it back in place. The light steadied. "You fix lights too?" Walter asked, eyebrows lifting. "Nah," Darren said. "I'm just tired of people living in the dark." For a long moment, Walter simply stared at him, really stared, as if he were studying something rare, something he had forgotten existed. "Not many treat me like a human anymore," Walter said quietly. "People see the chair or the scars or the uniform I don't wear anymore. They see a burden." Darren shrugged, wiping his hands on his jeans. "My mama raised me to help people even when it hurts, even when it costs." Walter's eyes glimmered. "And what has helping cost you?" Darren laughed once, shaking his head. "Don't get me started, old man." But Walter didn't laugh. He stepped closer, looking at Darren like he was seeing a soldier without the uniform. "A man only talks like you when life has beaten him to the ground and he still chooses to stand." Darren swallowed hard. Nobody had ever said something like that to him. Walter reached for a small wooden box on a shelf. His hand trembled slightly. Inside the box was a torn patch from an old military jacket, faded but still recognizable. "I carried this with me from Vietnam," Walter said. "It belonged to the bravest man I ever met. He died saving a child we'd never met. Said the world needed more people who acted without expecting anything back. You remind me of him." Darren froze. His heart thumped louder than the old refrigerator's engine. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because men like you are rare," Walter said, "and rare men should never walk alone." Darren didn't know what that meant, so he just shrugged it off, grabbing his backpack. "Just take care of yourself, old man," he said with a grin. But as he turned to leave, Walter's expression shifted just slightly, something calculating, something urgent, something that wasn't there before. "If you ever need anything you call me," Walter said. His voice trembled with sincerity and something else, something hidden beneath years of silence. Darren waved it off. "I appreciate it, but I don't even own a phone right now." Walter's eyebrows lifted. "Then you come here, you knock." "Day or night, clear," Darren chuckled. All right, don't worry, I'm good." But he was, and Walter seemed to know that. As Darren walked out of the apartment building, he didn't see Walter move faster than a man his age should. He didn't see him grab a small flip phone from the counter. Didn't hear the sharp inhale as Walter scrolled through numbers he hadn't touched in years. didn't catch the tremble in Walter's hand. This wasn't fear. This was duty waking up again. Darren walked down the hallway, humming softly, thinking about which job application he needed to fill out next, unaware of the storm quietly forming behind him. Back inside the apartment, Walter pressed a number. It rang only once. "This is Walter," he whispered. A voice on the other side answered immediately, like it had been waiting for him for decades. Walter's breath shook. "I found someone," he said. "Someone who needs us. A good man, the kind we used to protect." The voice responded, calm, steady, disciplined. "Send the address." Walter's eyes hardened with an old soldier's resolve. "Already did." He hung up, staring at the door Darren had just walked through. "You helped the wrong old man today, son," he murmured to himself. "Or maybe the right one." And with that single call, something began, something large, something dangerous, something life-changing. Darren, still halfway down the street, had no idea that 7 men, warriors, brothers, ghosts of the past, were already preparing to come for him. Not to hurt him, but because Walter had decided Darren was worth protecting. That night, Darren walked home with the heavy exhaustion of a man who'd spent his last strength doing good in a world that rarely returned the favor. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that felt more like loneliness than peace. His building stood crooked, old bricks, stained with years of rain and neglect, windows cracked like tired eyes watching him return to another night of nothing. He climbed the narrow stairway, every step groaning under his weight, as if the whole place wanted to give up before he did. His apartment door stuck as usual, forcing him to shove it open with a shoulder. Inside, the dim yellow bulb buzzed weakly. The room was more shadow than light. A slow leak in the corner dripped into a plastic bucket, plink, 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 counting the seconds of a life stuck in hardship. His mattress lay on the floor, thin and lumpy, barely enough to call a bed. The fridge clicked when he opened it, revealing its sad contents, one slightly bruised apple and a bottle of tap water he had filled at a public fountain earlier. But Darren smiled anyway. It wasn't much, not even close, but tonight he didn't feel empty. He felt useful, important in some small way. He sat on his mattress, held the apple in his hand, stared at it like it was a feast, then whispered into the darkness, "At least I did something good today." He lay back, staring at the ceiling's peeling paint, and closed his eyes. Tonight he slept with the quiet pride of a man who chose kindness over comfort. But Darren didn't know, couldn't have known, that he wasn't alone. Not tonight, not anymore. Across the street, hidden in the alley's shadows, an unmarked black van sat silently like a predator waiting for the right moment to move. Its windows were tinted black, its engine completely off, as if it were part of the darkness itself. Inside were 7 men, silent, focused, disciplined. Their breathing was slow, controlled. Their eyes never left Darren's apartment window. These weren't ordinary men. Their posture was perfect, every muscle ready even at rest. Their movements were precise, synchronized without a word. All of them wore dark jackets, and beneath the sleeves, matching ink peeked through, an emblem of a trident wrapped in a serpent. Beneath it, the words, "SEAL Team Echo." They were legends whispered about in military circles. Ghosts, operators called only when the mission required more than skill, when it required loyalty, honor, and absolute silence. The tallest among them, codename Hawk, adjusted his earpiece. His gaze was sharp, assessing everything: the stairwell, the windows, the fire escape, the rooftop, the alley exit. Nothing escaped him. "Target confirmed," Hawk murmured, voice low but steady. "Apartment B12. No hostile presence, no surveillance from external parties. We have clean access." Another man, stockier, with a scar running from his jaw to his neck, codename Ridge, was scrolling through a small tablet showing thermal imaging of the building. Only one warm body inside Darren's apartment. Alone, unarmed, vulnerable. Ridge nodded once. "Target is asleep. Heart rate steady, breathing normal. He's exactly what Walter said." The others exchanged silent glances. None doubted Walter, not for a second, but seeing the man themselves, living in such poverty despite a heart so generous, stirred something in them. Something they hadn't felt since their own days on the battlefield, watching brothers sacrifice everything for someone else. Another operator, codename Viper, leaned forward from the back seat. His voice was controlled but carried an edge of emotion. "That kid spent his last $8 helping a man he didn't know. No hesitation. Walter was right. He's one of us." Hawk exhaled slowly. "He doesn't know that yet." The van remained still, the men watching the dim light from Darren's apartment flicker through the broken curtains. Darren shifted in his sleep, tossing slightly, murmuring something unintelligible. The men watched every movement, not out of suspicion, out of protection, out of respect, out of duty. Then the radio in Hawk's earpiece crackled softly. A deep voice, calm, authoritative, unmistakable, came through. "Walter, Echo Team, report." Hawk pressed his finger to the earpiece. "Target secure, no threats detected, awaiting next directive." There was a short silence. Then Walter's voice returned, quieter now, carrying the weight of secrets and years. "Proceed at 600. Hawk nodded. "Understood." The others straightened subtly, every muscle ready. 600, orders locked in. They would move at dawn, not to eliminate, not to detain, but to protect, guide, and deliver something Darren didn't know he deserved. Help. Real help. Life-changing help. The kind men like these didn't offer freely to the world, only to those who had earned it in ways no medals could measure. The van went silent again, but the men remained alert, eyes trained on the window where Darren slept. They watched him like guardians carved out of steel. He was unaware, curled on his thin mattress, believing he was invisible to the world. But 7 of the world's most elite warriors were watching him, because the phone call Walter made wasn't simple. It was a call invoking old bonds, old promises, and a brotherhood stronger than blood. A call that had only ever been used when someone truly deserved protection. As the clock in Darren's apartment blinked 3:17 a.m., Hawk finally spoke, almost to himself. "He has no idea we're here," Ridge smirked faintly. "He will at dawn." Viper's voice was a quiet vow, "and his life won't be the same." The van sat unmoving. The night deepened. And Darren, unaware of the soldiers watching over him, slept in the quiet peace of someone who didn't know salvation was already parked outside his window. At exactly 6:00 a.m., when the sun was barely climbing over the rooftops and the city was still rubbing the sleep out of its eyes, Darren was pulled from his dreams by a sudden, thunderous knock on his door. Not a neighbor's knock, not a landlord's knock. This was the kind of knock that shook the entire frame, vibrating through the thin walls of his shabby apartment like a warning from the universe. Darren sat up instantly, heart racing. For a moment he wondered if he was dreaming. Then another knock. Boom, boom, boom. All right, he called, stumbling to his feet and almost tripping over the edge of his thin mattress. He rubbed his eyes, wiped drool from the corner of his mouth, and opened the door. Then he froze. 7 Navy SEALs stood in formation in the hallway. Their uniforms were crisp, spotless, perfectly fitted. Their boots gleamed even in the dim hallway light. Their expressions were carved from stone, serious, focused, unwavering. Darren's mouth fell open. One of them, a towering man with a jaw sharp enough to cut glass, stepped forward. His presence filled the entire space, commanding and calm. "Are you Darren Cole?" Darren blinked. "Why, yes." The man nodded once. "You helped a man named Walter James yesterday?" Darren felt a sudden spike of fear. Did something happen to the old man? His voice trembled. "Yes, is he okay?" The SEAL took one step forward and unexpectedly saluted Darren. Darren nearly jumped backward. "Sir," the SEAL said, voice deep and steady, "Walter James is not just a veteran. He is Commander Walter James, the most decorated SEAL in our team's history. He is our mentor. He saved our lives more times than we can count." Darren stared, eyes wide, breath caught in his throat. Commander, decorated SEAL, mentor, Walter, the man he'd bought groceries for. Another SEAL, standing to the right, spoke next. He had a scar across his cheek and eyes that carried years of war. "Commander James called us last night. He told us you used your last money to help him. No hesitation, no expectation. He said that men like you are why he fought in the first place." Darren felt heat rush to his face. He shook his head quickly. No, I didn't do anything special. He needed help. Anyone would have done the same." The SEALs exchanged a look. Not a single one of them believed that, not with what they'd seen in this world. The leader stepped closer, his boots silent on the hallway floor. "Commander James told us something else." Darren swallowed. "What?" The leader's voice softened, not weakly but respectfully. "He said you restored his faith in humanity." Darren's chest tightened, his eyes strung, he looked away, embarrassed. I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," the leader replied, "but you should hear this." The hallway felt smaller, the air charged, like something life-changing was about to happen. Then the leader spoke the words Darren would remember for the rest of his life. "Today, we are here to return the favor." Darren's heartbeat thudded in his ears. "Return the favor? What does that mean?" The tallest SEAL turned and gestured to the others. The formation parted slightly. 2 men stepped forward holding a sealed military-grade case. One of them set it gently on the floor. The other unlocked it with a code Darren didn't recognize, something long, precise, memorized. The case clicked open. Inside was gear. High-end, tactical, professional gear, protective equipment, boots, a heavy jacket, tools, all pristine. "Well, why are you giving me this?" Darren stammered. A SEAL named Ridge answered, because a man who helps others should never struggle alone. Another added, because a man who gives his last dollar shouldn't go hungry. The leader stepped closer, eyes calm. Commander James asked us to evaluate you, not as a soldier, as a man. Darren frowned. Evaluate me? Yes, the leader continued. We watched your apartment last night. Darren's heart jumped. You what? We saw the leak in your ceiling, the empty fridge, the mattress on the floor. Another SEAL added quietly, we saw how you whispered to yourself before sleeping. At least I did something good today. Commander James was right. You have a spirit most men lose long before your age. Darren felt his throat close. He didn't want pity, but this didn't feel like pity. It felt like recognition, respect. The leader took a deep breath. So here's what returning the favor means. He raised one finger. First, you're not paying rent anymore. Darren's jaw dropped. What? Commander James already spoke to your landlord. Rent covered for a year. A year. Second, your fridge will be full by noon. A SEAL behind him lifted a hand. We've already arranged the delivery. Third, your ceiling will be fixed by 3 p.m. Another SEAL nodded. Our engineer is on the way. Darren stared at them, overwhelmed. Why do all this for me? The leader stepped forward until he was face to face with him. Because Commander James said you're the kind of man he would have died protecting, and that means you're the kind of man we will protect too. Darren's breath hitched. His eyes filled, and he didn't care enough to hide it. The leader softened just slightly. But there's one more thing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded note. Commander James wrote this for you. Darren took it with shaking hands. The paper was old, the handwriting shaky but strong. He opened it slowly. It read, "Thank you for reminding an old warrior that goodness still lives in this world. When my brothers come to you, don't be afraid, you earn them." Darren lowered the note, voice trembling. I don't deserve this. The SEALs answered in one unified voice, steady, certain, undeniable. Yes, you do. And at that moment, 6:12 a.m., the sun rising behind them, Darren Cole's life quietly, powerfully changed forever. The SEALs stepped into Darren's tiny apartment like warriors entering a battlefield, but what they saw inside made even the toughest of them pause. The place was smaller than most storage rooms they had slept in during deployments. The air was cold, the kind of cold that seeped through clothes and bone. There was no proper bed, just a thin mattress on the floor, dented in the middle from years of wear. The ceiling leak dripped steadily into a bucket that was already half full. Paint peeled off the walls in long, curling strips like old wounds. Empty shelves lined the living room. The fridge door hung crooked, groaning as one SEAL opened it to find almost nothing inside. One apple, a bottle of tap water, a jar of expired peanut butter. The SEAL quietly closed the fridge, jaw tightening. The leader, Hawk, removed his cap slowly, respectfully, like he was standing inside a fallen soldier's home. "Sir," Hawk said, voice low and tight, "this is not acceptable." Darren flushed, embarrassed. "It's just temporary, I've been between jobs, things just got rough." But before he could finish, the SEALs moved, not casually, not politely, but with the instant, disciplined precision of a special operations mission. One word from Hawk was all it took. "Echo team, move." And chaos became order. Ridge and Viper immediately dropped their gear bags on the floor and headed toward the breaker box. "Wiring is dated, possibly unsafe," Ridge muttered. "Let's rework it." Sparks flew as they opened the panel, their hands moving with steady expertise. Within minutes, they had replaced 2 faulty fuses, repaired a loose connection, and rewired a fire hazard waiting to happen. Lights across the apartment flickered, then glowed steadily for the first time in months. Across the room, another SEAL named Frost dragged a ladder beneath the leaking ceiling. "Water damage spreading," he said. "Whoever lived here before didn't know what sealant is." He worked fast, patching the rot, sealing the weak spots, tightening a pipe joint inside the crawl space above. The dripping stopped instantly. "Leak neutralized," Frost reported. Darren stared at him. "Neutralized? It was just a leak." Frost shrugged. "A problem is a problem, sir. Doesn't matter if it's a hostel or a ceiling." Meanwhile, Blaze and Echo began cleaning like a 2-man demolition crew. Blaze grabbed a trash bag and swept through the apartment at lightning speed. Old newspapers, broken hangers, chipped plates, useless wrappers gone. Echo wiped down the walls, scrubbed grime from the corners, cleared dust from air vents and polished surfaces until they shone like new. "Sir, do you know how much dirt accumulates in uncleaned vents?" Echo asked. No. Enough to start a small civilization," Echo replied grimly, tossing the rag into a bucket. Another SEAL, Wolf, had already sprinted out of the apartment. 10 minutes later, he returned with 4 full grocery bags balanced effortlessly in his arms. Fresh fruits, vegetables, meat, eggs, milk, bread, rice, pasta, snacks, everything. Wolf moved with quiet purpose, unpacking each item neatly into the fridge and cabinets. Nutritional loadout ready, he said. No one under Commander James' protection goes hungry. Darren opened his mouth to protest, but Wolf simply shook his head once and Darren fell silent. Then came the final transformation. Titan and Hawk hauled in 3 large boxes. They cut them open with military knives, smooth, clean motions. Inside was a brand new bed frame, mattress and full bedding set. Titan dropped to one knee and began assembling it with the speed of a man who once built survival gear under enemy fire. Hawk laid out the sheets and blankets with unexpected gentleness. The bed came together perfectly, far better than anything Darren had ever owned. "Try sitting on it," Hawk said. Darren hesitated. "I don't want to dirty it." Ridge from across the room replied without looking up. "Beds are meant to be used, sir. Sit." Darren sat. The mattress didn't sag, it didn't creak, it didn't feel like sleeping on disappointment. For the first time in years, it felt like comfort, real comfort. The SEALs continued working with military efficiency, adjusting shelves, tightening screws, wiping windows, aligning furniture for optimal space, ensuring no hazard remained. They even replaced Darren's broken curtain rod with a new one Hawk pulled from one of their supply bags. "We don't leave broken things behind," Hawk said simply. 2 hours passed. 2 hours, that was all it took. When Darren finally stepped back and looked around, he felt like he was staring at someone else's apartment. The place was clean, bright, organized. The leak was gone. The electricity worked. The fridge was full. The bed looked like something from a catalog. The entire apartment smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and fresh wood. It looked like a home, a real home, not just a room where a man tried to survive. Darren's throat tightened as he turned slowly, taking it all in. I don't even have the words," he whispered. Echo stepped forward. "You don't need words, sir," Wolf nodded. "Commander James gave us the mission." Frost added, "We executed it." Hawk placed a hand on Darren's shoulder, firm, grounding. "This isn't charity. This is respect." Darren's eyes glistened, emotions swelling in his chest. "I've never had anyone do something like this for me." Hawk looked around the transformed home and said quietly, "Get used to it. You're under our watch now." And for the first time in a very long time, Darren felt safe. At exactly noon, when the sun stood high and poured warm light across the street, a sleek black SUV rolled silently to a stop in front of Darren's building. Its windows were tinted, the kind of dark that whispered authority. The SEALs inside Darren's apartment immediately straightened the moment they heard the engine. They exchanged subtle nods, a silent message passing through them, "He's here." Darren, who was still staring at his transformed apartment in disbelief, turned when he heard the door open. Titan stepped aside, posture rigid. And then Walter James, Commander Walter James, rolled in through the doorway in his wheelchair, the wheels gliding smoothly across the newly cleaned floor. But he didn't look like the frail old man Darren had met in the grocery store yesterday. His posture was straighter, his eyes brighter, his presence heavier, commanding, like he could fill a room without needing to stand. Behind him, 2 SEALs stood like silent guardians, but Walter lifted a hand, signaling he needed no escort. "Morning, boys," he said to them. They all stiffened and saluted instantly, their voices unified. "Commander." Walter smiled a small, proud smile, then turned his attention fully to Darren. "Son," he said softly, with that gravelly warmth that only came from age and battle, "you helped me when you had nothing. You didn't look at my chair, you didn't look at my clothes, you didn't judge my worth by my wallet. You helped me because it was right." Darren swallowed hard, hands fidgeting nervously at his sides. "I just did what anyone should do." "That's where you're wrong," Walter replied. "Most people walk past men like me. They see a burden. You saw a person." Walter then gestured around the apartment, nodding toward the SEALs who stood like statues. "So I called the only family I had left." Darren blinked rapidly, looking between Walter and the 7 SEALs. "Family?" Walter nodded. "These men, my team, my brothers, I trained them, bled with them, saved them more times than I can count, and they saved me more." The SEALs didn't move, but their eyes softened faintly. Walter continued, voice gentle, "And you, Darren, you remind me of the men I served with, the ones who would give the shirts off their backs even if it left them cold. The ones who did the right thing even when no one watched." Darren felt his chest tighten. "Sir, I didn't do anything special," Walter chuckled. "And that humility right there, that's what makes you special." Then Walter reached into the pocket of his weathered jacket. His hands trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the weight of what he was about to give. He pulled out a plain white envelope and extended it toward Darren. "This," Walter said quietly, "is from me." Darren hesitated before taking it. The paper felt heavier than it should have, as if carrying the gravity of something life-changing. He carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter and a check for $50,000. Darren's breath left his lungs. His vision blurred. His hand shook so violently he nearly dropped it. $50,000, he stuttered. For what? Walter's voice deepened, not stern but heartfelt. For giving when you had nothing. For treating me like a human when the world forgot I was one. For reminding an old soldier that kindness ain't dead. For proving that there are still good men out there, even in the hardest corners of life. Darren stared at the check as if it were unreal. I can't take this. I can't accept something like this. It's too much. Walter wheeled closer, eyes locking with his. Listen to me, son. I've lived a long life. I've seen men with everything, and I've seen men with nothing. But the rarest man is the one who gives anyway. He lifted a hand and placed it gently on Darren's trembling fist. This isn't a gift. This is recognition. You earn this. Darren's throat tightened until it hurt. But I'm nobody. Walter shook his head firmly. Not to me and not to them. He nodded at the SEALs. In one synchronized motion, sharp, powerful, flawless, they raised their right hands to their brows and saluted Darren. The sound of their boots shifting echoed through the tiny apartment like thunder. Darren froze. 7 elite warriors, the best of the best, saluting him, a man who had slept on a floor yesterday, a man with nothing, a man who gave his last $8 to a stranger. The moment felt unreal, overwhelming, sacred. His eyes flooded instantly, tears spilling faster than he could wipe them away. His knees wobbled. Pressed a hand to his face, but the emotion kept pouring out of him. Years of struggle, hunger, loneliness, fear, all released at once. Walter's voice softened. Let it out, son. You carried too much for too long. Darren broke completely, sobbing into his hands, shoulders shaking as the SEALs respectfully lowered their salutes but kept their eyes forward, giving him the dignity of the moment. No pity, only honor, only respect. And when Darren finally managed to look up again, Walter smiled. Warm, proud, fatherly. Today, he said, your life changes, and not because of the money, but because you finally know your worth. Darren cried again, this time not from pain, but from overwhelming gratitude, the kind that cracked open a heart that had been bruised for years. He wasn't alone anymore. He wasn't invisible. He wasn't forgotten. And for the first time in his life, he felt seen. A month later, Darren's life looked nothing like the cold, hungry world he'd been surviving in. The transformation hadn't come from luck or miracles. It had come from a choice he made when he still had only $8 in his pocket. That single act of kindness had created a ripple that was still moving through his life, touching every corner of it. With the money Walter gifted him, Darren didn't run away to a new city or waste it on things that didn't matter. He paid off every debt that had been clawing at him for years, the kind that made every ring of the phone feel like a threat, the kind that made sleep feel dangerous. He fixed his mother's old home, patched the roof that leaked every monsoon season, repaired the windows that rattled in the wind, repainted the peeling walls she had been too tired to fix alone. For the first time in years, she slept without worry, and every day she hugged him longer, as if afraid he might slip back into the shadows he had spent so long trapped in. Darren also enrolled in the community college's electrical program. He had always been good with wires, circuits, and repairs. Helping Walter had reminded him that his hands could build futures, not just struggle through broken nights. Every morning he woke before the sun, caught the early bus, and sat in classrooms with students younger than him, but he never felt out of place. He felt like a man finally catching up with the life he deserved. Meanwhile, Walter visited him every Sunday without fail. Some days he came with stories of the old days, of jungles and battles, of brothers lost and brothers saved. Other days he simply sat there, sipping the coffee Darren made for him, smiling like he'd found a missing piece he didn't know he needed. The SEALs visited too, not as soldiers on a mission, but as men who had adopted a new brother. They fixed things Darren didn't even know were broken, brought him tools, taught him skills, and refused to take no for an answer whenever he tried to decline their help. They treated him with a respect he had never known, a respect that felt heavier and more meaningful than money. Darren wasn't rich, not in the way people counted riches, but he had something far more valuable, a foundation. For the first time in his life, he wasn't living day to day, wondering where his next meal would come from or whether he would lose the little he had. He had food in the fridge, books for school, tools for his future career, and people who cared if he made it home safe. He had stability, he had direction, He had the quiet, steady kind of hope that grows roots instead of wings, and every time Walter visited, he repeated the same words, as if engraving them into Darren's spirit. Remember, son, heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they're just men with $8 and a good heart. And each time Darren heard the words, he felt something shift inside him. Not pride, not ego, but a deeper understanding that the smallest kindness could reroute destinies. He had lived it. He was living it. And he knew that for the rest of his life he would carry that truth forward, not for gratitude, not for reward, but because someone had shown him that even when the world is cold, even when you are broke, forgotten, or unseen, kindness is a force that never returns empty. It always comes back, sometimes in ways that feel impossible. Darren looked at his rebuilt life, at the memories of the man he used to be, and whispered a promise to himself. He would never let his heart harden again. He would help others the way he once helped a stranger in a wheelchair, because he finally understood something powerful. One act of compassion could turn an ordinary man into the beginning of a miracle. And Darren Cole was ready to be that miracle for someone else.